Well, good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you are watching this. I'm chatting with Adele Spraggon, who's a coach, facilitator, and author. She's also an international speaker, trainer, and award-winning author of the book Shift. I'll just show it to you for those of you watching. There's the book, and it's also, you got a deal going on your website that if you buy it now, you get 20% off, I noticed. So go onto your website, right? adelespraggon.com. So the book is about 4 steps to personal empowerment. Adele's guided thousands around the world to be happier and live more fulfilling lives, as well as helping CEOs build multi-million-dollar companies by showing them how to get out of their own way. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Her deep knowledge of the human condition comes from partly from her Master of Arts in Humanities, as well as her years of experience as a certified meditation facilitator. Adele, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
It is, and I'm looking forward to our chat today. We planned this last year. Boy, last decade. Where did that
That's go? Right.
I know.
Where did that decade go?
Yeah. And that's nothing to fix, everything to be. And we're going to look at that. There you are. There's Adele. And of course, you see her on video too. And we're looking at creating a movement, what it takes to create a movement, build raving fans, and have the courage to step up your game. And Adele, we're really at a pivotal time in history right now. These past few weeks, with the ending of last year and then the start of this new year, and we're doing this on Thursday, January the 9th. It's been a bit of a wild ride around the planet. And the chatter I'm seeing online, on social media channels, and what I hear other thought leaders suggest is that this year is going to be a time of massive change, and that we really have to shift and do things differently to truly lead. In your work, Adele, you teach a learning program around building a movement. What is a movement? Is it the peace movement we saw back in the late 60s? Or is it the rise of the feminine we saw in the 70s? Or is it the recent riots we saw in Hong Kong in the fall and summer? What is a movement, Adele?
Well, the way I define a movement is 1,000 raving fans and a unique intellectual property that sells. So that's just the simple definition. So what are we talking about here? Well, entrepreneurship is growing massively now, and there is lots of competition out there when it comes to you getting your message out there and getting heard in the world. But also there's something else happening, and you're touching on it when you talk about the riots and all of that stuff, is that people really want change. They see this desperate need for change. They see a desperate need for us to do different stuff. I mean, we see it all over the world today, how much eruption is occurring. And so entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful ways that we can start those changes at a grassroots level. And I know that many of your clients, David, are very interested in bringing something different to the world and using what they already know in order to create that change. So to do that, the easiest way to do that is through a movement. It's no longer through creating a business. It's by creating a movement of 1,000 people who really like what you do, who want to move that message forward for you on your behalf, and you being the leader of that movement and standing powerfully in, here's what I do, here's my message, and here's who I help and how I help them.
So what is it about that work that speaks to you, Adele? Of all the training programs that you do, why does helping people create a movement speak to you?
Well, that's a really great question, because I do help many different people, many different niches when it comes to repatterning, and we'll get into what that means.
Yeah, I've gotten all prepared for you today.
Okay, but the reason that I really like helping entrepreneurs is because I see that at the grassroots level, that's where change can be made, and entrepreneurship moves quickly. It's unlike corporations, unlike big business. who have a lot of obstacles in order to create movements. Entrepreneurship can do it fast. And so if we're going to change the world, it is the grassroots that are going to change it. And I believe that together we can change the world. That's my motto, actually. We can't do it individually, but together as a group, if we can combine forces, we can make a massive difference.
I totally agree with you, and I'm working on something myself that I've had in the back for a couple of years, and now it's time to launch it this year.
Awesome.
I've been studying with social media and YouTube marketing thought leader Evan Carmichael. I don't know if you know him, and he works with budding thought leaders, and he encourages them to communicate online using video, to share their pain, their journey, and how they overcame. And he talks about helping them, build their tribe using YouTube. Is this thinking of sharing your personal story the key to creating a movement, Adele?
I believe it's a major part of it, but I don't believe it's the only thing that's needed to create a movement. If we can get into repatterning at this point, David, I feel that repatterning is the way to create your movement. It is the way to get out of your own way. It's the way to change what you do, the actions that you take in order to be effective when you tell that story, effective when you lead that message, and do whatever you need to do in order to make sure that people get what it is that you're teaching, right?
Got you. So I'm going to get to that, but I got a couple of questions that I want to know too first before we do. Is that okay? So
sure, of course.
In terms of marketing and or business development aspects that go into creating a movement, what other than maybe YouTube, sharing it on YouTube or using video, what other sort of marketing and business development aspects go into you creating a movement?
Okay, well, I am not a business coach, and I just want to get that very clear. Okay. I'm a performance coach, so there's a bit of a difference there. But one thing I have found is in order to generate your 1,000 raving fans, those 1,000 people who are going to spread that message for you, you need a vehicle to do that. And that vehicle is unique to the individual. So you can definitely use YouTube videos. That's a very effective channel. Podcasting, writing a book, blogging. Am I missing anything, David? I think those are the major vehicles. Oh, public speaking. Thank you very much. Yes, like being out on stage. Okay. So having your vehicle that you use and just being consistent at it is how you're going to build that movement. So today's market is not about attracting the masses. That's not important anymore. There's just too much noise out there to do that. Today's market is about attracting your small niche, those small number of individuals. And when I say small, remember, we're talking 7 billion people on the planet. So, I mean, small is not small anymore, but attracting those people who want what it is that you have to sell. And that's what's important. And in order to do that, you need that vehicle.
Okay, now we'll get into the repatterning now. So creating something bigger on a movement really demands us to step out of our comfort zone. And you work with your clients a lot on the mental, the psychological, the emotional aspects of life. What do we need to do to launch a movement and step out of our comfort zone and into realizing our truest gift to the world?
Yeah, great question. And probably maybe the easier question is, how do we step out of that comfort zone? Because stepping out of that comfort zone is absolutely necessary, right?
Right.
If we're going to create a movement, then we need to do that. So let's look at what's going on when we butt up against that comfort zone. So the easiest way to think about yourself, David, is think about yourself as an iceberg. And at the top of the water are all of your actions, all of your behaviors, all of your beliefs. So everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel lives on the surface of that water. Under the water is where our subconscious patterns lie. So our brain is wired to create patterns. And some of those patterns work. some of those patterns lead to effective actions, effective behaviors, effective beliefs, and some of them don't work. And they lead to procrastination, avoidance, quitting, feeling scared, running away, all of that stuff that we do when we don't have an effective pattern. So neuroscience lately has proven something fascinating. In the last 20 years, there's been tremendous amount of research into our brains, what's going on inside our heads. And what neuroscience has now determined, and this is becoming more and more proven every day, is that the action you're about to take has already been predetermined by your subconscious patterns before you consciously become aware that you're going to take that action. So do you need me to repeat that?
Yeah.
Before you know that you are going to do something, your subconscious has already moved you in that direction. You've already been in action towards the thing that your brain then turns around in reflection and says, wow, I would like to do that. So let's just take some simple examples, right?
I don't know an example of how that works, you know, like.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So before, just simply, like just some simple stuff, and you've all done this. Ever found your head in the fridge and wondered, wow, how did I get here, right? It's because your subconscious pattern has already moved you in the direction towards I'm hungry before your brain says I'm hungry. How do you pick up the phone and make phone calls effortlessly? How do you do it? Why is it that we struggle to pick up the phone and make sales calls, right? The reason is because you're already in action towards I don't want to pick up that phone, or in action towards I want to pick up that phone, depending on if you have a workable or an unworkable pattern. Our subconscious predetermines what it is we're going to do. So this changes everything. It changes how we do life. It's no longer about willpower, commitment, goal setting. All of that is important, yes. But when you can't get out of your own way, when you feel stuck, it is simply because you do not have a pattern that is yet able to take that action. So what we need to do is change the pattern, not change the action.
Okay. So what is it ultimately that holds us back? I mean, I was with a colleague last night who's doing work around fear, and as a fear and anxiety coach. And one of the things that holds him back is his desire to be perfect. So where does, what holds us back, and where does this notion of perfection impede us as well, Adele?
Oh, absolutely. So, that's a massive pattern for many, many people, is this idea of perfection. And there's all sorts of patterns. I mean, that's just one of them. And definitely your friend, if he's got a pattern for perfection, he will be avoiding making mistakes, avoiding looking stupid, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and then the stuff he put into, he's doing videos, he's using YouTube as his methodology of delivery. And the prep he did for a simple 25-minute video took him like 2 hours, right?
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. That's what tends to happen. We get bogged down. So a pattern of perfection. Well, let's just think about what is happening here. So let me just define what a pattern is in my terms.
Mm-hmm.
A pattern is an intertwined physical sensation, emotion, and thought. When the three aspects of our being come together, they result in a particular action, a particular behavior, a particular belief. So the physical, the mental, and the emotional come together to form a pattern. Now, I don't have your friend in front of me, so I can't help him to identify what that pattern is, but we can guess, right? So probably when he goes to do those YouTube videos, I mean, one of the things he may be experiencing is tension in the body, right?
Yes.
He may be experiencing fluttering in the stomach. He may interpret that as, as the emotion fear, or self-doubt, or confusion, right? So there's the emotions that might be coming in. And his brain will interpret all of that as, oh my gosh, this isn't good enough yet, right? And so now, based inside that pattern, he now starts to try and perfect everything rather than just moving forward. But let's just imagine that he could just remove that pattern. Let's just imagine that he could just go into his brain and just plop that pattern on the outside, right? And just forget that it was happening. Well, then that feeling of tension and that stomach churning and all of that stuff would just disappear. That feeling of fear and confusion and overwhelm and anxiety, that would just disappear. That thought, I'm not good enough, or this isn't good enough, would just disappear. And then what action do you imagine he may be taking at that point? Can you see how that might make it a lot easier for him just to get in front of a camera and just try something, right? And then reflect on it afterwards and say, oh, that was pretty good, you know? Yeah. So all of that anxiety just goes away when we're working with patterns. So, and if you want, David, I can give you some case studies that show this, that show the difference between before and after. Would that be helpful?
Yeah. So, and then how do we recognize the patterns to begin with? Like, you know, like he's aware
great question.
that you know, the need to be perfect, and then probably relates to, you know, shame issues, right? Like, what if I screw up?
Yeah.
Or people going to say, you know, I'm going to look like a loser or whatever. I'm not saying that's the case here, but how do we identify that we have a pattern that's running us, first of all?
That's a really great question. So the human brain is wired to create patterns. Our brain has neuron circuits, we'll call them, that are just creating channels. So you're always in patterns. That's the easiest way to put it. It's just sometimes those patterns work and they take effective actions, and sometimes they don't work and they take ineffective actions. So I think what you're asking is, how do you tell if you've got an unworkable pattern?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, the subconscious is always trying to communicate with us all the time. And how we know that we're running an unworkable pattern is it sends us messages such as, you're not good enough. It sends us emotions such as fear and confusion. It sends us physical sensations of churning stomach and anger and all of this stuff. And it's just simply trying to tell us, hey, knock, knock, you're running an unworkable pattern. Time for an upgrade. Let this one go. Let's create a different one, which brings you effortless results. So our subconscious is brilliant. It's constantly trying to communicate, but it communicates in way of emotion. It doesn't communicate in way of verbal language. It doesn't speak English, I like to say, right? So it's constantly sending us these negative experiences in life, just simply trying to tell us it's time to change the pattern. That's it.
Right. So we'll see it play out in real life as a negative experience.
Yeah. You got it. Exactly.
And then it's up to us to say, oh, you know what? I'm tired of swimming in this. I better do something different. Right?
Yeah.
What about the notion of procrastination? How do we get, you know, off of our limiting beliefs about ourselves and back on the court and into action, as it were?
Yeah, great. Procrastination is something that many, many people struggle with when they're faced with an unworkable pattern. So I'm going to say something that may sound a little bit strange. I don't believe that there's any such thing as procrastination. I think what we have is
like Yoda, there's only do or do not, right?
No, not true. The behavior can be to procrastinate, but when we really look internally to why we're procrastinating, it is most likely because we are trying to avoid something. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, people procrastinate because the experience of taking that action is so fear-based or so or confusing or anything like that. It is that emotion that we try and avoid. And inside avoiding that emotion, we end up procrastinating or doing something else. Nobody procrastinates on watching TV, right? Nobody procrastinates on eating if they want to eat. We procrastinate on the things that scare us. Okay. And so it really is an avoidance.
So then how can we begin to have clarity and courage to move forward and move past these limiting beliefs and patterns? How do we get the courage from within, Adele?
Easiest way is to remove the pattern that is creating the fear. That's the quickest and fastest way to get into action. And when you when you do that, here, let me just give you a couple of case studies so you can hear what I'm talking about. I'm going to read you a couple of stories of before and after from my clients, and you can hear the difference in what they're saying. So this is from Michelle. I've got more done in the last 3 weeks than I have done in the last 3 years, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything. My task list just disappears and it's effortless. Before repatterning, I was avoiding projects like my divorce paperwork and other things that involved a lot of numbers. Now I just do it without a lot of thought, and it feels effortless. So what are you hearing? What's the difference, David, between a workable pattern and an unworkable pattern in that?
I think
right?
A bit of an attitude of just do it and get her done. I heard that.
Right.
And
yeah.
I heard freedom from her overthinking and just to act.
Brilliant. Yes. Inside an unworkable pattern, we have a lot of analysis. Everything feels like hard work, right? It requires discipline and willpower in order to move forward. There's a need to convince ourselves inside an unworkable pattern. Whereas inside a workable pattern, as you're saying, you're just in action. It feels natural. And there is little to no thought required. And when you think about areas of our life, David, that work, like where we are running unworkable patterns, isn't that true? We all have areas of our life that work really well for us. And it does just feel like, yeah, I can just do this. And you're just moving forward and just doing it with very little thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. But, I'll just read another one to you here because some of them are really, really interesting. I knew I needed to be able to sell in order to survive. This is from Carol Lewis. She's over in Hong Kong. I knew I needed to be able to sell in order to survive in business. And yet I had this great aversion to selling. It was ridiculous yet real. Changing patterns is interesting. At first, I didn't notice much, but then I realized that I was having conversations and selling. Adele often said, you don't know it's working until on the court, which means that you have to be in the situation in order to know if you've got optimal patterns that are now running, right? And that was exactly it. I wasn't aware I had changed my patterns until I was in the situation. It then felt natural to do something I had been stuck on for so long. That was over a year ago. Today, I regularly have sales conversations without worrying about them. So what do you hear in that? What's the difference between a workable and an unworkable?
Well, better results when it's workable.
Mm-hmm. Optimal result.
Yeah, and courage that I talked about. She's now got the courage to do it because she's seeing a tangible result.
Yeah. And there's an element of surprise in there. Can you hear that in what she was saying? Like she didn't know until she was in the court, right?
Yeah.
So isn't that true? Like, don't you sometimes surprise yourself by your results and you go, wow, I didn't know I could do that. And then you're doing it. That shows that the brain has rewired spontaneously by itself and created an optimal pattern. So our brains are consistently rewiring themselves. It's just we need a technique, a tool in order to do it consistently and effectively if we're going to start what I call running uphill, right? So running uphill means, yes, you're progressing fast and up the mountain where you want to get to, but you're doing it without, oh, geez, I've got to drag myself up here and pull myself to the top, right?
Right. So what about shifting our attitude? How does that help in repatterning? Or shifting our attitude towards something. So instead of seeing it as work or onerous or painful or, oh man, it's tough, shifting our attitude and our languaging maybe too around it. How does that help with repatterning, Adele?
Well, all of those traditional methods that we have used in the past in order to get to our goals, right? And that's what you're talking about. So positive thinking, proper goal setting. What else do we use? Help me out. What are some of the traditional methods? Willpower, commitment, get somebody to hold you accountable, all of that stuff, right? It does work, but let's look at how and why it works. So what happens when you take a different action over and over again, like you're building a new habit, for example, eventually what happens is that new habit trickles down into the subconscious and changes the subconscious patterning. And at that point, then you move from it being effortful to it being effortless, right? So, somebody who, for example, has a fear of flying, get on the plane enough times, fly over and over and over again, and eventually you will be comfortable flying. The same with being on the stage.
Yeah,
same
you'll
with
have enough points to have a free trip.
Exactly. But we need to look at how that works. And it's because eventually the subconscious has changed its patterning and now you're comfortable. Great. Nothing wrong with that. But what you're talking about is if you're butting up against something that's not working for you, if you're getting in your own way, wouldn't it be easier just to have a tool, David, to go into that brain and repattern it in 2 minutes rather than having to wait all of that time for your subconscious to catch up to the new habit that you're trying to create, which can take decades, right? In some cases, So it's easier if we just know how the brain works, just understand the difference between conscious and subconscious and how the subconscious is in control. Go in there, reprogram the subconscious a little bit. It only takes 2 minutes. And then boom, you're just getting on that plane. You're just stepping out onto that stage, but without the fear, without the need to keep pushing up against that comfort zone over and over again.
Right. We're with Adele Spraggon, and aside from being a fabulous teacher and coach, you're an author of the book Shift: 4 Steps to Personal Empowerment. In the book, it's all about patterns and how we think, act, and do. And then you lead us into a dialogue on repatterning our brains. And now you're saying, hey, it's easy. It's like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but easy isn't simple. I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
It is easy.
Okay, so you talk a lot about letting go of our limiting beliefs. So first of all, where do patterns begin in our lives? And you said we can shift it quickly. So how do we do that? So where do they begin, and how do we shift it fairly quickly then? And
yeah, awesome question. So
is this practice, like a daily practice?
Well, repatterning does take 6 weeks to learn. It takes 6 weeks to learn how to repattern your brain because your brain is used to doing things a certain way. And so it's a 4-step process that I teach. I teach it over a 6-week window where you just consistently apply a different piece of that technique each week until your brain forms a pattern for repatterning. Okay? But let me answer your first question. Where do these patterns originate from? Because that's key for understanding how our brains are working. So we're not born with patterns. Human beings don't have instincts like animals have. We come into this world pretty much blank slate, and we have to learn, create our patterns as we go through life. And so from a very early age, from the moment that we step into this world, our brains are rapidly trying to figure out what's going on out here around us and trying as best it can to create patterns for those situations. And so between the ages of 1 and 5, you have a massive amount of pattern creation. And then you continue to create patterns throughout your childhood, and in your teenage years, you have another massive expansion of pattern creation. But by the time we hit our adult years, around the age of 26, 27, when our brain is now fully formed, that pattern creation slows down. Now, it's not that you no longer are able to create patterns. That's not true. Your brain has what is called plasticity, which simply means that it is constantly rewiring itself all the time. It's just that once the pattern box is full, I'm going to call it, once the subconscious feels like it's understood every single situation that it will ever face, then it just stops thinking that it needs to create new patterns, and it just starts running on the patterns it created in the past. Now, the problem with that is today's world is speeding up very, very quickly, as we know. And so those old patterns that we created when we were little, which used to work in a traditional village setting environment, right? When life was simple, those used to work. You could take your patterns from the past and you could continue to use them throughout life and get effective results.
Yeah.
Now the world is changing so fast. Those patterns that you created in the past are now obsolete today. And the patterns that you create today will be obsolete in a year from now, right? So now there's this need to start repatterning fast. There's this need to let go of those past created patterns and create optimal patterns that fit this situation, this now, this here, right? And so to do that, we now need techniques such as repatterning. It's just, I like to say it's almost cruel today trying to run on the patterns from the past. Our mind just can't do that anymore as effectively. And sadly, one of the, every age has its plague. Today's plague is mental illness. Our minds are cracking up, trying to keep up with, oh my gosh, what's going on around me in this situation. And it's so much nicer and kinder to ourselves when we just know, oh, okay, hang on a minute. I'm butting up against my comfort zone. I'm facing a fear here. It's because I'm running an old pattern from my past that needs an upgrade. Great. I'll just go in there and just gently upgrade that pattern. And then you just step out and everything just is comfortable again. It's effortless again. It's easy again. And those fears just drop away.
You know, you bring up fear, and with all the changes happening around us these days, there's a lot of fear on the planet.
Yeah.
Fear of our livelihood, fear of what's going to be, fear of what's next, fear of what's Donald Trump going to do. You know, next.
Absolutely. That's right.
And I'm looking, I look a little deeper at what's going on around us, and I'm not seeing it. I mean, in some cases, it's really horrific, right? But I'm also seeing it as a nudge from the universe, even God, to get us out of our comfort zones and wake us up and to address these problems in a way that we've never done before. So it's actually ignited us to start to think differently and act. Whereas before we didn't act. Before we, 10 years ago, who would have thought of creating a movement around their work or to bring something new and birth something new into the planet? Are you seeing that because of what's happening around us globally? Are you seeing that as a bit more of a trend that the business people you're speaking to, the thought leaders, even Joe Blow, working in an organization, is starting to think differently and then wants to really commit and create change and create something different and bigger in a movement? Are you seeing that more in your life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're 100% right. As the world speeds up, we can no longer continue to operate the way we did a decade ago.
Oh,
right?
Not at all.
Like it's just not working anymore. And so I believe that techniques such as the technique that I teach, repatterning, is precisely coming about because of exactly what you're talking about. We need now to do things differently. And the most effective way to do things differently is by changing our subconscious patterning. It's the most effective way I've found to do things differently. But also it brings about that level of creativity that is now needed, that new problem solving that is now required, right? You can only do that when you come from the unknown, right? So letting go of old past created patterns, that's what we know, but we need to get to the unknown now if we're going to move forward powerfully. And that is done most effectively through changing the way the patterns think, for sure. Mm. And for whatever reason that we're going through this, we know that how we got here was by taking ineffective actions in our past.
Yeah.
Globally, as a humanity.
Yeah.
Right?
And we need more, people coming together rather than being divisive. in the approach.
Oh yeah, and we can see the divide is occurring more and more. Like people are building walls, right?
Yeah.
And dividing rather than coming together. And so to let go of those fears will allow us to come together and solve the problems together. And that's what's needed. And that's why movements are starting today. We need to build those 1,000 raving fans. We need to collect people around us and then spread the message from there. We can't do it individually anymore.
And your programs and training program does exactly that. Help somebody,
exactly,
helps to empower and reprogram and to get people into action and on the court. What are the steps to begin to repattern our fears, doubts, beliefs that will enable us to launch a movement? What are those steps?
Yeah, awesome. First thing you need to do is identify the pattern, right? So you need to know, like you were saying before, like your friend, how do you know that it's perfectionism, right? So that's key. So you need to first identify what is in the way, because our minds often create confusion and prevent us from seeing what it is that we're butting up against.
Mm-hmm.
Second step is you need to own it as a pattern. You know, we look at the world around us and we think that the problem lies in one of three places. It lies either out there in the situation. I don't have enough time, for example, right? Or it lies in somebody else. They're the problem. It's my boss, it's my spouse. They're the problem, not me. Or we say, I'm the problem. I'm not good enough. The problem doesn't exist in any of those three places.
Oh, that's important.
The real and only problem is that we don't have a pattern for this situation. That's the only problem. And that is not your fault. It is just simply because nobody has taught you how to repattern, right? So step two.
They don't teach it in school, and your parents sure as heck didn't teach you either, right?
That's right. That's right. Because neuroscience didn't know this. Nobody knew this. This is brand new information just coming through modern brain scanners that are allowing us to see this. And that's important to know, because we swim in a world of blame and shame, because we are taught that you should be able to take an action once you know what that action is. We are taught that the problem is in the situation out there. We're not taught how our brains work effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing that, you can say, okay, it's not me, it's my pattern. Well, that's great. That's step two. Owning it as a pattern is very empowering in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Step three is a way to deconstruct the pattern. So remember I said that the pattern is comprised of three pieces: the physical, emotional, and mental. Those three pieces are intertwined right now, and that's what creates that particular action. So when we remove a pattern, we just gently tease those three pieces apart. We put the physical back into just a physical sensation, the emotion back into just an emotion, and the mental thought into just a mental thought. And we do that through a unique method of observation that works. That's very simple to learn, but again, simple isn't easy. And then the fourth step is then, when we have removed the old, now we can create the new. And that's where you start taking those new actions. And that's what's really exciting, when those elements of surprise that Carol Lewis was talking about, that's when those come in. It's like, wow, I did that. Awesome. But without the fear, without the doubt.
Yeah. Where does practicing self-love come into the equation? Because we can be hard on ourselves if we recognize a pattern of shame and fear and guilt and, you know, all those things that stop us. How important is it to practice self-love in towards change, to accept ourselves as we are? And then
that's a great question.
For ourselves.
Yeah, so self-love is in and of itself a pattern. If you don't have self-love, it's because you just don't have a pattern for self-love right now. That can be changed, okay? So that's important to know. But because we haven't understood the workings of our mind up until the last 20 years, we have oftentimes confused the vehicle with the end result, okay? So the end result of running optimal patterns is self-love, positive thinking, happiness, joy in relationships, lack of conflict. That's the end result. Forgiveness, all of that stuff. Because we haven't understood that, we are using these things such as self-love, forgiveness, gratitude, all of those things as if they are the vehicle to get us there. And so we need to flip that. If you don't have gratitude, if you don't have self-love, if you're not self-forgiving, it's just simply a pattern. Let the pattern go. The optimal pattern will bring about self-love. It will bring about forgiveness.
Wow. And how important is having a daily practice of meditating, visualization, and affirmations in order to help us to repattern and to have the courage and the gumption and the oomph to create a movement? How important are those three actions?
Again, great question, David. If you don't have a technique to repattern the brain, they are absolutely essential. Okay? So until you know how to repattern, yes, those things are really important. Once you know how to repattern, then if meditation, if affirmation will support you, if it is a workable pattern for you, and that's as an individual, then you will continue to do it. And if they're not a workable pattern for you, if they're just not needed for you, then you just won't do them. But again, the end result will be everything that people are striving for inside of meditation and affirmation. So that's why the vehicle gets dropped if it's just unnecessary. So every individual is different. And, you know, I still meditate. I'm a meditation facilitator by heart. But I used to do it in order to get somewhere. I used to do it because I felt like I wasn't good enough. And that's where that I struggle with techniques such as affirmations and things like that. It's because we are using them to strive to fix a problem, a perceived problem inside ourselves many times. At least I'll speak for myself. That's why I was doing it. Today I meditate just simply because I want to meditate. I don't do it for a reason. And that's the difference, because I already feel peace of mind and contentment. And I don't have, you know, in the past, I would have all of this self-doubt and all of this anxiety. And I struggled with 20 years of panic attacks, right? But I don't have that anymore. So I'm not using any of this stuff. I just do it because, hey, this moment I feel like doing it. At this moment it works for me. And if it doesn't, I don't. And it doesn't mean anything about me either way.
Okay. So when you shifted your meditation approach, what shifted in your life?
When I shifted my meditation?
When you let go of the attachment or belief that you weren't maybe good enough in meditating, or you were doing it to fix something, when you shifted that into sort of just doing it for the sake of doing it, what showed up in your life?
Well, I think the horse came before the cart. So before, I like I was saying, I had all of this anxiety. Once I repatterned that anxiety, so panic attacks are a pattern. Once I was able to just remove that pattern, then the need for meditation just dropped away. So what changed by my changing my relationship to meditation? That may be a missed question. It's more what led up to me being able to change my relationship to meditation.
Okay.
And what led up to that was running optimal patterns that no longer said I was broken, right? That no longer said that there was something wrong with me and something needed fixing. And at that point, I was just able to relax inside of a box of optimal patterns, right? So my brain now runs optimal patterns in which, hey, it's okay, you know, I don't have that same anxiety. I don't have that same doubt and fear and confusion anymore.
So
Did that answer your question? I'm not
yeah,
sure if I got that.
it does.
Okay.
And I like the fact that, you know, you're okay. You know, like we really are okay. You know.
I'm okay. You're okay. What
Yeah.
was that old
Yeah.
affirmation? Yeah.
But you know, the flip side of that is that we could, if we really think we're okay and our stuff doesn't, you know, we don't have imperfections, we could sort of
Oh,
be
can
more
I comment on
specific
that?
about it, right? So how do
Can
we
I? Can I?
how do we be humble at the same time, humble leaders and humble movement creators? How do we practice?
Yeah. Awesome question, because I do need to clarify that. I am not perfect. Okay. Far from it. I
Oh,
make
now you
tons of
just ruined my
mistakes.
whole opinion of you. The interview's over. No, I'm just kidding.
Far, far, far from it.
Mhm.
But the difference is here. I'm just gonna. I have these little
Yeah.
squeezy balls. Okay. All right, and I give them out at all my trade shows. But what's interesting is what's written on the pack. So what's written? Yeah, David has one too. So David, hold up the back of yours.
Yeah, my patterns made me do it.
My patterns made me do it. So the difference is when a repatternist, when somebody who knows this technique understands fully how patterns work. Remember, action is coming before you become consciously aware that you're going to take that action. And so if somebody makes a mistake, it's just simply, oh, okay, my patterns made me do that. I didn't choose to do that. My subconscious just made that action that didn't work, right? And so now we would just reflect back and we say, okay, did that work or not? If it didn't work, then we have a method to just go in there and remove the pattern that took that action. If it did work, keep it, great. But if it doesn't, there's no beating yourself up anymore. How can you beat yourself up to something that you didn't choose to do, right? Mm-hmm. So you just become very, very self-forgiving and very humble at the same time. You talked about humility and very forgiving of others, because when your patterns are in control, when you know that, when you're just aware that, oh, okay, I didn't choose to do that. They didn't choose to do that. Their patterns made that, took that action. Then what is there to blame? Why is there any need to feel shame? And at the same time, we're aware that the subconscious is in control. So there's no need also for, oh, look at me, look how proud I am of myself, because we didn't choose that either, right? I didn't choose to write a book that became an award-winning book. My subconscious did that. And so I can't take credit for that. I'm like, yeah, okay, thanks, patterns.
Yeah, because I think that, we have to be mindful that if we are going to be leaders and thought leaders and movement creators and things like that, that we still have to have I guess some humility around it and some reverence for it, right? Or else we could turn into self-absorbed narcissists. Really, I mean that's the down.
Oh, Trumps, many Trumps.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
So I guess once we've cleared some of these, once we've acknowledged our patterns, is this when we're ready to create something bigger than ourselves? Like, do we have to?
Sorry, I didn't quite
to create a movement, we have to identify our patterns, work on repatterning, and then once we've done that, once we've cleared some of those beliefs, doubts, fears, behaviors, actions, are we ready then to create something bigger than ourselves? Are we ready then to create a movement?
Yes, absolutely. At that point, you're able to step into the movement maker role, right? So to lead that movement, because there's nothing in your way anymore that is holding you back from taking the actions that need to take. So David, you're an amazing business coach. I mean, that's what you do, right? So you're able to set the direction for people. You're able to say, okay, here's what you need to do in order to get your business going, right?
Hmm.
Imagine giving all of your people, all of your clients the tool so that they can just take those actions without the fears and the doubts coming into play, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. Once you're able to get out of your own way, then the sky's the limit, really. I mean, what do you want to create? That's the only next question.
You know, I've been doing a lot of meditating myself over the holidays, and the theme has been letting go of limiting beliefs, letting go of maybe what might limit me a little bit. Just letting go with love, not like, oh, that's it, you're out of here, but letting go for now with the possibility of later on. But really, it's I got to let go. And we talked about this earlier this week, that my word for the month is focus. And so I'm choosing to focus on the things that really need my attention, not on the things that are taking away my attention, that are draining my energy, that are bothering me. Because it's like, well, they're there, and I'm going to put them in a box, and I'll look at them later. But right now, I got to really focus on the task at hand. How important is that kind of attitude or mental part of the game in order to really step fully into being a thought leader, into being a movement creator?
Well, again, focus is a pattern. So once you've set your goal and you've said, this is what I want to achieve, if you find that your focus slips and that you're looking at something else and not doing what you need to do, then it's a matter of saying, oh, okay, I've got a pattern that's running that is not allowing me to focus. Remove that pattern and you will be focused. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a method of subtraction, not addition with us when we're repatterning. So what do we need to take away in order to be effective? And in this case, it's, lack of focus. Okay, lack of focus comes with an emotion. It comes with a physical sensation. It comes with thought, right? And that, it needs to be removed. And then, boom, you'll just be focused again.
Yeah. Do you have a case study of someone you taught or coached who went through this transformation totally to launch a business or a cause greater than them? You know, Mothers for Drunk Driving comes to mind, Adele, but, you know, they have to get over, you know, their grief of loss in order to create that. But in your work, who stands out and what's transpired?
Yeah, awesome. There's an amazing lady in the States. Her name's Liz. She runs a company called Textile Evolution. And she started as a textile artist when I first met her. And her sole goal was to get into I'm blanking on the name, a gallery, right? To get her art into a gallery.
Right.
And as she started to repattern, she started to realize, oh my gosh, I've got so much more to offer the world than just my art, my individual art. She now runs a nonprofit around textile sustainability because, you know, as she says, textiles is the second biggest polluter on the planet. Mm-hmm. She runs a nonprofit. She also has a Facebook group where she's teaching people how to find inner peace through art, how to tap into their right brain and really bring about peace of mind. And she teaches something called stitch meditation. She's incredible. She's actually running two powerful businesses at the same time. One is a nonprofit, a movement towards sustainability, and the other is this whole concept around peace of mind. And that came about just simply by removing the patterns that were in her way and going from, I'm just an artist, and nothing wrong with being an artist, please don't hear me like that, but I'm an artist, to I'm a movement maker, right? This is what I do and this is who I am. And that, who knows where everybody's going, right? Anybody who uses this technique, that element of surprise is going to really shock you, really shock you. I mean, I've got people who are building $20 million businesses just by removing the patterns that are in the way of their leadership, of what stops them. So the future is open.
I love it. Now, the one thing that I find daunting and we're almost out of time here, but daunting is, how do you build 1,000 raving fans? What are some of the things that go into that?
Yeah, great question. So first you need a vehicle. Let me back up. First you need intellectual property. You need a unique message today. Today's market is not about same old. It's about, what do you have? Give me a different story. Give me something hopeful. Give me something that I can believe in, that I can say I can do that. So that creates unique intellectual property. And then you need a vehicle to get that property out there. And like we were saying before, that might be videos, it might be a podcast, it might be a book, it might be a blog, speaking from the stage, but some vehicle that your fans can now find you through that vehicle. Okay. Yeah. And then, when I say unique intellectual property, please don't let that scare you, right? Oftentimes people go, oh my gosh, I can't come up with something unique. Yes, because your subconscious is extremely creative. And when we remove the old pattern that keeps consistently telling us that this is right, this is known, then the brain is naturally creative. Our brains are problem solvers, and give it a problem and it will find a unique solution as long as we get out of our own way.
Yeah, it's like my colleague who let go of his fear and said, okay, I'm not going to prepare so much, I'm just going to do it. And you know what? Magic happens, right?
Exactly. Magic happens. I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. Magic will happen.
So you have a few courses coming to another hotel room near you. I did one with the Novotel in North York. What do you have planned for the start of 2020? And can you share what's coming up? And, for someone watching today, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, awesome. So
where do we reach you?
So we do have a Movement Makers Masterclass February 13th at Novotel at North York Center. That's a great opportunity it's a full day.
Or February?
Sorry?
The 13th of
February 13th.
Okay.
February 2020. So we don't know. That's a full day where you're going to learn how to create that unique intellectual property that sells, how to sell it, choose your vehicle, learn about how to attract those raving fans and how to retain those raving fans and help them to spread the word for you on your behalf. And then finally, how to get out of your way and lead your movement. So it's a 3-part day, which is really, really kick-ass, okay? So that's coming up. The other way people can get in touch with me is on my website, adelespraggon.com. Or you can email me at adelespraggon.com. And like David was saying in the beginning, the book is available on the website for 20% off. So you can grab your copy there. And the book gives all 4 steps of the 4-step repatterning technique. So, yeah.
So adelespraggon.com, and there's the spelling on our screen. I want to thank you for this today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was Adele Spraggon. She joined us from her home office. You're in Richmond Hill, right?
Markham.
Markham.
Close. We're neighbors.
She joined us from her home office in Markham, and I really, really appreciate this. And wow, what a treat doing this today.
Oh, thank you, David. You're awesome, and it's been such a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks. And and thank you for watching, for those of you who are tuning in. Thank you.